I know the exact moment my son, Adam, looked me in the eye and chose the money over me. It was a Tuesday, the last time I let him into the house my Arthur built with his own hands, and the last time I mistook his smile for affection. He was already gone. I can still see the stark white of the legal pad on the kitchen counter, lying next to my half-finished cup of tea, the paper where he and his wife, Clara, had coldly outlined their plan. The sight of the words, eviction notice, effective 90 days, written in Adam's own neat script, was less shocking than the quiet dread that settled over me. It wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate, detailed, final betrayal. They needed the house sold immediately, and I, his mother, was nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to their liquidity. I looked out the living room window at the old oak Arthur planted when Adam was born. The glass reflected the rigid, unflinching sight of my own face, not tearful, but suddenly very, very hard. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me keep sharing more. I kept the notice tucked away for 3 days, wrestling with the sheer cruelty of it. This wasn't just losing a house, it was the erasing of my entire history, a calculated act to push me out of my final safe place. When Adam finally called, he used the rehearsed line, bright and corporate, "It's just business, Mom. The market is hot right now. What would you have done if your own son said that?" That was the small insult, but the bigger humiliation followed quickly. Clara started emailing me links to affordable assisted living communities, their websites filled with the forced cheerfulness of places for people who are meant to be forgotten. The audacity made my hands tremble. The line wasn't crossed until Adam stood in the living room itself, the very floor he took his first steps on, and pointed a dismissive finger at Arthur's favorite leather armchair. "We don't need the furniture, Mary. It's too dated," he said, his voice flat. "We've hired movers for next week to haul everything to Goodwill." That was the cruel action, a deliberate dismissal of my memories. He saw a room full of dated junk. I saw the life Arthur and I had built, reduced to a donation pile. I walked to the side table and picked up the small, heavy bronze clock Arthur gave me on our 20th anniversary. I felt the rough hands of the clock's casting, a sense of taste touch anchoring me. As Adam turned to leave, satisfied he'd delivered the bad news, I spoke calmly, my words low and intense. "You won't be needing those movers, Adam," I told him. "Not yet." He stopped, turned back, and let out a short, scoffing laugh. It wasn't loud, but it cut me deeper than any scream. "Come on, Mary. Don't be dramatic. What exactly are you going to do?" He thought he was dealing with a frail, grieving widow. He didn't realize that in his rush to claim the house, he ignored the one thing Arthur had protected, the discovery of an object that changes everything, a signed legal document tucked away in the back of Arthur's old war desk. That document didn't just give me leverage, it shifted the power entirely. And that single piece of paper forced the lawsuit that brought us both into that courtroom, where everyone would soon laugh. But what did that forgotten document say, and how did its truth force me to betray my own son? I knew the exact price of his betrayal when I heard the sound of the car pulling away. Not a roaring engine, just the precise, distant crunch of tires on gravel, signaling the end of Adam's short, dismissive visit. The house was silent again, but the quiet was heavier, no longer comforting. It was loaded with the residue of his cold intentions. The emotional trigger for this chapter needed to be shock at hidden truth. The little bronze clock felt cold in my hand, anchoring me, but my mind was spinning backward to the night Arthur died. It wasn't the peaceful passing everyone thought. The truth had been hidden, a secret buried under layers of grief and forced optimism, and it was about to surface suddenly. It started with a phrase Arthur used to say, a gentle warning he repeated whenever we talked about our affairs: "Always protect the roots, Mary. The leaves will take care of themselves." I'd always assumed he meant our savings, our investments, the common things people worried about. But Adam and Clara's calculated greed, their complete disregard for my well-being, made me look deeper, past the superficial leaves of the situation. I walked past the armchair Adam had insulted, feeling the quiet dread build in my chest, and went straight to Arthur's old desk. It was heavy mahogany, smelling faintly of leather and pipe tobacco, and I remembered his hands, rough from years of honest work, tracing the lines of the wood. The long-hidden secret surfacing suddenly wasn't a sudden burst of light, it was the meticulous nature of my late husband. Tucked behind a false bottom in the third drawer, a trick he'd shown me decades ago, something he called his just-in-case measure, was an envelope. Not just any envelope, but a thick, cream-colored one, stamped and sealed by the firm of Hayes, Burton and Associates. Inside, the truth that shifted the entire dynamic: a codicil, handwritten by Arthur just 3 months before his passing, dated and properly witnessed. The original will left the house to Adam, yes, but this codicil, the discovery of an object that changes everything, stipulated a clause. A clause so cruel, yet so legally ironclad, it made my son's eviction notice worthless. As I read the dense, formal language, my eyes blurred slightly from the intense focus of my sight. The codicil stated that I, Mary, could live in the house until my passing, but if my son or his legal representatives ever attempted to force the sale, occupation, or eviction of his mother from the property, ownership would immediately and irrevocably revert to a local children's hospice. It was a contingency plan born of deep betrayal Arthur must have sensed brewing, a silent judgment passed on his own son. He hadn't protected the house for me, he'd protected it from Adam. The realization hit me like an unexpected, cold shiver, a physical taste touch of the hidden truth. The man I loved had foreseen this darkness. I placed the document on the desk, the heavy paper still crackling faintly. Adam had tried to humiliate me by reducing my home to dated junk. Now, the tables were turning, and his fate, the fate of his inheritance, rested on his next move. The final betrayal that forces the ultimate revenge hadn't happened yet, but the fuse was lit. I folded the paper carefully, knowing exactly how I would use it. I wouldn't call him, I wouldn't warn him. I would let him proceed with his hired movers and his corporate emails, building his case, until the very moment his hand reached out to claim the house. I thought that was the end of the day's revelations, until the phone rang. It was Clara, not Adam, and her voice was sickly sweet. "We've decided to come by with the moving company foreman tomorrow, Mary. Just to measure. Hope that's okay." My heart rate went up. She warned me. Don't show up tomorrow, but she had no idea what I was preparing. What exactly did I plan to do when they showed up on my doorstep, now armed with the secret that could destroy their entire future? The polite threat from Clara, delivered with that saccharine voice, ratcheted up the tension and made the truth feel heavy, like a stone I was carrying. The emotional trigger for this chapter is a blend of regret and grief, twisted into simmering resolve. The focus shifts to a calm domestic memory twisted into dread. I needed to create some small relief for myself, to breathe, before the next tense confrontation. That next morning, the house was bright, the sunlight streaming in the kitchen, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. I made myself coffee, the aroma of the strong, dark roast a necessary sensory taste touch to steady my nerves. I was standing in the same spot where Arthur had proposed, 24 years earlier, his face earnest as he knelt on the worn linoleum. That calm memory, usually a source of comfort, now felt twisted into dread. How could such a beautiful beginning lead to such a wretched end? I felt the betrayal not just from Adam, but from the cruel indifference of fate itself. My husband's contingency plan, the codicil, was my shield, but also a source of deep regret and grief. He hadn't just guarded the house, he had acknowledged the failure of our son long before I was ready to admit it. Arthur had lost hope in Adam before he lost his life, and that hurt almost as much as the eviction notice. Do you think I was too forgiving here? I took a deep breath. Now wasn't the time for self-pity, it was time for action that crossed the line from defense to offense. I didn't wait for Clara and the foreman. I called my lawyer, a sharp, silent woman named Ms. Chen. I didn't tell her everything, only that I was facing an issue of probate dispute and needed immediate, quiet representation. Then came the preparations, the cruel action that crosses the line. I went to the den, the room Adam once claimed as his game cave. I looked at the built-in shelves where his old baseball trophies and university pennants sat. I felt a surge of cold purpose. I meticulously stripped the shelves bare, loading all of his memories, every object, every sentimental piece, into 3 large black garbage bags. I needed to send a signal, and the physical sight of his past being erased felt powerful. I sealed the last bag with a harsh tug of the drawstring. I thought about the house, about the kind of legacy Arthur truly wanted. We've all seen cases like this, but this one is different, I whispered to myself, activating the community building engagement. The difference was the hospice. Arthur's final act was one of unexpected charity, and that provided my leverage. The sound of a heavy truck turning onto the gravel driveway was the first warning sign, a loud, grating sound that meant the tense confrontation had arrived early. Clara and a bulky man in a company polo got out. They were here not just to measure but to intimidate. I unlocked the front door just as Clara's hand reached for the bell. Her face, usually so composed, froze when she saw my calm, determined expression. The shock on her face was almost satisfying. But the foreman, seeing the 3 black bags sitting conspicuously on the porch, leaned down and muttered, "Guess she's already packed." "Easy job." Clara smiled, a brittle, triumphant thing. "See, Mary? This will all be over soon. Just sign here, and we can finally start moving things out." She presented a clipboard, a basic authorization form for the removal company. I didn't sign. I didn't even touch the clipboard. I looked directly at the foreman, then back at Clara. "I'm not signing anything. And those bags aren't mine," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet utterly cutting. "They're Adam's past, and they go straight to the municipal dump." The air left Clara's lungs in a sudden rush. This was the moment I realized I had initiated the sudden entrance of an unexpected person, not a person, but a powerful legal entity. Before Clara could recover, my own phone rang. I answered it, my eyes locked on hers. "Yes, Ms. Chen? You have it. Excellent. Please send the certified letter immediately, addressed to my son." I hung up, and the look of pure, paralyzing shock at hidden truth on Clara's face was total. You never saw the danger coming, and most people don't. Subscribe so you're not caught off guard. Clara dropped the clipboard. She staggered back a step, realizing that the gentle widow she came to bulldoze had just unleashed a force she couldn't control. "What have you done, Mary?" she hissed, the sweet mask finally dissolving. What I had done was initiate the legal action that would force us both to face a judge, but she had no idea the kind of explosive evidence I was holding back. What was in that certified letter that would change their strategy from intimidation to outright panic? Clara's gasp was a thin, high sound that seemed to steal the air from the entire porch. I could almost smell the sudden, metallic tang of her panic, a sensory taste touch that was strangely satisfying. The emotional core of this moment was pure shock at hidden truth. She had come to administer the final paperwork, the small humiliation, and instead, she had found me armed and organized. The realization that I had secured legal representation and was sending a certified letter was a shocking revelation that immediately twisted her confidence into fear. I stood there, watching the rigid sight of her perfectly composed face crumble. The foreman, seeing the shift in power, quickly made himself scarce, mumbling something about rescheduling. The house felt quiet again, but this time, it was a conquering quiet, not one of isolation. I remembered a conversation with Arthur years ago, a time of calm reflection, where he said, "Never show your opponent the full deck, Mary. Just the card that makes them fold." This new situation wasn't about negotiation, it was about forcing their hand, making the stakes so high that they had no choice but to escalate to the public arena. The certified letter wasn't the codicil itself, it was merely a formal notification that I, as the legal life tenant of the property, had initiated action to challenge the executorship of the late Arthur Thompson's estate. It was a lie of omission, a carefully crafted hint of mystery. This was the start of the escalating stakes. The small insult of the eviction notice was over. Now, we were moving to the bigger humiliation in front of others, a courtroom battle. Adam had used his legal training to try and exploit me. Now, I would use the court system to expose him. I wasn't seeking revenge, not exactly. I was demanding justice for Arthur's memory and for the years I had poured into that home. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone close? This was the deep cut that changed trust forever, an emotional betrayal enacted by my own blood. Later that afternoon, the confrontation came, a furious, unannounced visit from Adam. He burst through the front door, not bothering to knock, his face a mask of scarlet rage. "What is this, Mary? What games are you playing?" he spat, waving the certified letter like a flag of war. This was the moment of tense confrontation I had been waiting for. "I'm not playing games, Adam," I said, my voice measured. "I'm protecting what's mine. You chose to try and take it by force. Now, the courts will decide." He scoffed, the same dismissive, short sound from before. "The courts? You have nothing. The will is clear. You're wasting your time and hours." He leaned in, his breath hot and ragged, the anger palpable enough for me to almost feel the heat, a strong sensory taste touch. "Drop the challenge, or I will make sure you don't even get a retirement community. I'll fight this until you have nothing left." This was the threat unanswered, the mini cliffhanger that pushed me forward. She warned me, "Don't show up tomorrow," but she had no idea what I was preparing. He was acting on anger and greed. I was acting on the calculated plan Arthur had left behind. "You're right," I told him, meeting his gaze. "The will is clear. But your father was smarter than you gave him credit for." He laughed, a truly bitter sound. "You think you know something I don't. This house is mine, and you will be out by the end of the month." He slammed his hand down on the hall table, the unexpected sound a startling physical danger interrupt. But what Adam didn't know was that I hadn't just secured a lawyer, I had secured the single piece of evidence, the codicil, that would not only block his claim to the house but expose the shocking family betrayal that had been long hidden from everyone. The confrontation escalated to the next level, forcing us into a deposition the following week. What was the exact evidence I planned to use to ensure his ultimate public humiliation? The fury in Adam's face, the scarlet sight of his rage, was the final proof I needed. He cared only for the asset, not the person. The emotional tone for this chapter shifts to a focused betrayal, a deep, unshakable awareness that I was now dealing with a stranger. The script needs a sense of calm reflection followed by a new betrayal or twist. I spent the next 3 days in the kind of hyper-focused silence that only comes when you are preparing for war. My life was now strictly procedural, a direct contrast to the chaotic emotion Adam was projecting. I made a new cup of tea, the bitter, familiar taste touch reminding me of countless mornings, and I started arranging the evidence. The original will, the eviction notice, and the codicil, the long-hidden secret surfacing suddenly, were laid out on the dining room table, illuminated by the harsh overhead light. I realized the greatest family betrayal revealed immediately wasn't just Adam's greed, but the fact that he was so confident, he hadn't even checked the secondary filings. He was betting on my grief and frailty. That confidence was about to be obliterated. I called Ms. Chen. The conversation was brief, clinical. I instructed her to file the codicil with the court clerk at the exact moment Adam's deposition began. I needed the shocking revelation to hit him in the most public, inescapable way possible, leveraging his professional environment to maximize his humiliation. This wasn't just about the house anymore, it was about exposing his character. But that wasn't the last surprise my son had planned. I said to myself, the mini cliffhanger already forming. The day of the deposition arrived. I wore a simple black dress, nothing attention-grabbing, projecting calm reflection. Adam was already there, flanked by a young, nervous lawyer. He ignored me completely, his eyes fixed on the notepad in front of him. I could hear the constant, grating sound of him tapping a pen against the metal table, a sound of barely controlled impatience. He still thought he had the upper hand. The humiliation was already setting in, the fact that his own mother was sitting across from him, forced to defend herself against his mercenary actions. But the new betrayal or twist came not from Adam, but from a different unexpected person. The door to the conference room opened, and in walked Clara. This was the sudden entrance of an unexpected person. But she wasn't looking at Adam. She was looking at me, and her face was pale, tight with poorly masked terror. Adam jumped up. "Clara, what are you doing here? I told you to stay home." She ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on me, and then, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, not a legal document, but something personal. "I found this, Mary," she whispered, her voice cracking. "In Adam's filing cabinet. I think you should see it." She slid the paper across the table. It was a handwritten note from Arthur, dated just days before he signed the codicil. It wasn't about the house. It detailed a large, undisclosed loan Arthur had given Adam 5 years ago to save his struggling practice, with a solemn promise that if the debt wasn't repaid, Adam would sign over all rights to the marital home. This was the ultimate discovery of an object that changes everything, the debt that Arthur held over Adam, entirely separate from the will. It was the final betrayal that forces the ultimate revenge, a problem layered on top of the existing problem. Adam had tried to evict me for money, while secretly owing his father a fortune. Adam lunged forward, grabbing the note, his face contorted in disbelief and raw panic. "Clara, you didn't. You absolute fool." The room was silent, save for the frantic shuffling of paper as Adam's lawyer started hyperventilating. I realized that Clara, driven by the fear of losing the house to a hospice and the fear of Adam's massive, hidden debt, had just committed an emotional betrayal against her husband. But even with this new, explosive evidence of Adam's moral bankruptcy, I still needed the court to confirm my position. Only subscribers get the full story, don't be left behind. The judge was scheduled to hear our emergency motion to block the sale tomorrow morning. How would Adam respond to his wife's devastating double-cross, and how would I use this new evidence of hidden debt to ensure the judge's verdict silenced everyone? Adam's roar of pure disbelief, a shocking, wounded sound, was the final confirmation that Clara's impulsive emotional betrayal had blindsided him. His face, moments ago furious, was now a portrait of absolute panic. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been abruptly cut. This tense confrontation was the peak of the internal family drama, and the dominant emotion here is heightened quiet dread. His lawyer, a young man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, quickly ushered Adam out of the deposition room, stammering apologies. The air in the room, thick with the taste touch of Adam's panic, slowly settled. I looked at Clara, sitting across the table, shaking. The long-hidden secret surfacing suddenly was this note, this debt. But the real secret was why she risked her marriage to reveal it. "Why, Clara?" I asked, my voice calm. I noticed the sight of her hand trembling as she smoothed down a wrinkle in her skirt. She whispered, her words rushed and choked, "He was going to lose it anyway, Mary. Not to you, to the bank. He borrowed against his practice, and the debt was due next month. He was pushing the house sale to cover that, not to retire." The family betrayal revealed immediately was now a 3-layered cake of deceit. Adam tried to evict me, Arthur protected the house via the hospice codicil, and Adam was secretly debt-ridden and facing foreclosure on his own assets. Imagine losing everything you worked for overnight. That was Adam's reality, hidden beneath his suit and bluster. This was a moment of small relief or hope for me, but a new betrayal or twist for the audience. The stakes were no longer just the house, they were Adam's entire financial ruin. The note, the discovery of an object that changes everything, didn't just expose his debt, it exposed the depth of his desperation. He never saw the danger coming, and most people don't. Subscribe so you're not caught off guard. I took the handwritten note. It was the last piece of preparation. I called Ms. Chen back and amended my instructions. The codicil would be filed first, but the debt note, the evidence of Adam's deep, dark financial crisis, would be the final piece of evidence presented to the judge, maximizing the impact. That evening, I was alone in the house again. I felt the floorboards beneath my feet, the cool taste touch of the old wood. I was surrounded by Arthur's memories, preparing to walk into court the next morning. I needed to ensure the title's promise would be delivered exactly. My reflection in the dark kitchen window showed a woman who was no longer grieving, but ruthlessly determined. The final betrayal that forces the ultimate revenge was finally set in motion. Adam had fought on the grounds of law. I would fight on the grounds of morality, using his own secrets against him. The physical danger wasn't to me, but to Adam's reputation and livelihood. He had gambled everything on my silence and lost. The next morning, as I put on my coat, I saw the discarded legal pad with the eviction notice Adam had written. I crumpled it up. The battle was over the moment I found Arthur's codicil, but the final, public execution of Adam's defeat was scheduled for 10 a.m. I thought about the court, the formality, the judge. What would you have done in her shoes? I was about to expose my only son as a fraud and a debtor, effectively erasing his inheritance not for my own gain, but for a children's charity. This was the ultimate line crossing. The judge's verdict had to be swift, final, and utterly devastating to silence the scorn. The time for the court hearing had arrived, and the true reason for Adam's urgency was about to be laid bare. What was the exact question the judge would ask that would expose Adam's deception? The marble hallway of the courthouse was cold, the immense space amplifying the nervous sound of my own footsteps. I felt the chill penetrate my thin coat, a sharp sensory taste touch that grounded me. The emotional tone here is quiet dread, the calm before the storm. I saw Adam and his nervous lawyer huddled by a water cooler, their argument delivered in low, desperate whispers. The sight of Adam's defeated slump offered no satisfaction, only a deep, abiding sorrow for the man he should have been. I was here to deliver the title's promise exactly. They laughed when Grandma walked into court. But the judge's verdict silenced everyone. The hearing was brief, an emergency motion to prevent the sale of the property. The courtroom was small, but the atmosphere felt vast and heavy. Adam had brought a handful of his business colleagues, people he wanted to witness his supposed victory, ensuring a small audience would be present for the bigger humiliation in front of others. As I slowly walked to my seat, dressed in my simple black, a distinct, brittle wave of muffled laughter went through Adam's section. It wasn't loud, but it was patronizing, dismissive. They saw a frail, easily manipulated woman, a grandma, about to be swiftly dismissed by the court. This was the moment of small insult or cold remark I had to endure. I ignored the sound, fixing my gaze on the judge. The judge, Justice Reyes, was a severe woman with tired eyes who exuded zero tolerance for drama. Ms. Chen, my lawyer, rose and presented our case first, focusing only on the challenge to the executorship, citing newly discovered documents. She was careful not to mention the hospice or the debt note yet, adhering to the strategy of delayed shocking revelation. Adam's lawyer stood up, confidently dismissing our claim as the baseless obstruction of a grieving relative. "Your Honor," he stated, his voice booming, "the will is unambiguous. The original testator intended for the property to pass to the heir without condition." Adam smiled, a flicker of his old smugness returning. The game was almost over, he thought. Then, Ms. Chen rose again, a single, cream-colored document held loosely in her hand, the codicil. "Your Honor, the petitioner, Adam Thompson, is correct. The original will is unambiguous. However, 3 months prior to his passing, Arthur Thompson executed this codicil, witnessed and notarized, which adds an ironclad contingency clause to the bequest." She waited for the judge to receive the document. The judge's tired eyes scanned the page. The courtroom was silent, the quiet dread was finally mutual. Adam's smirk vanished. The discovery of an object that changes everything was now in the hands of the law. Justice Reyes slowly lowered the document, her gaze settling on Adam. This was the new betrayal or twist not hinted at in the title. She didn't ask about the house. She asked about the debt note I had kept secret. "Mr. Thompson," the judge's voice cut through the silence, sharp and clear. "The court has also been made aware of another document relating to the testator's personal accounts, a signed acknowledgement of a large, unsecured loan from your late father to your legal practice, dated 5 years ago, with the house as collateral. Is this true?" Adam was caught completely off guard. His face was a ghastly white. He stammered, unable to meet her sight. "Your Honor, that is a private business matter, entirely separate from the will. It is not separate when the only reason you are rushing to sell your mother's home is to cover a crippling, hidden debt that jeopardizes the entire estate," the judge interrupted, her voice rising in cold fury. This was the escalating stakes, the cruel action that forces the court to demand justice. The room held its breath. Adam's colleagues, who had been laughing moments before, were now frozen, their faces etched with horror. Their laughter was already silenced. They realized they weren't watching a simple inheritance squabble, they were witnessing the exposure of a corporate fraud trying to hide his financial ruin. I thought to myself, he opened the door and what he found inside, we'll get to that in a moment. I am issuing an immediate, permanent injunction against the sale of the property, the judge announced, her voice final. The codicil's contingency is triggered. The property must pass as designated to the local children's hospice. Furthermore, I am initiating a full review of your executorship and personal finances. Adam collapsed back into his chair, a defeated sigh leaving his lips. The judge looked directly at me, the grandma they had mocked, and then at Adam's horrified friends. Her final words delivered the ultimate emotional blow. The court finds that the son's actions constitute a profound emotional betrayal of his mother's trust, his father's memory, and the integrity of this estate. Case dismissed. The judge's gavel hit the block, the sound was a deafening punctuation mark. The courtroom was silent, save for the sudden entrance of an unexpected person, a representative from the children's hospice who had been waiting outside. He smiled at me, a silent thank you. Adam had lost everything, the house, his reputation, and his father's final, hidden forgiveness. But what was the simple, heartbreaking moral lesson I took from this victory that destroyed my own son? The gavel's final, devastating impact, a dull, wooden sound echoed in the hushed courtroom. The promise of the title was delivered. The scornful laughter had been violently silenced, replaced by the chilling sight of Adam's defeated form, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with the shock of total ruin. The emotional betrayal he had enacted was finally paid back, not by me, but by his own father's foresight. The emotion here is a profound, exhausted regret and grief. I stood up slowly. I could feel the cold, slick surface of the codicil in my purse, the paper that had saved my home and ruined my son. It provided a terrible sensory taste touch, the bitter taste of victory. Adam's colleagues shuffled out of the courtroom, avoiding his eyes, avoiding mine. The bigger humiliation in front of others was complete. I walked past Adam, not looking at him, but stopping for a moment to place my hand lightly on his shoulder. He flinched, pulling away as if burned. I saw the tears pooling in his eyes, not of repentance, but of selfish, consuming loss. He said, "Stay away," I thought, recalling the opening confrontation, where Adam had tried to cut me out of his life. Now he begs at my door, but I've learned staying away can be powerful too. This brought the full circle ending into sharp focus. I left the courthouse, the bright midday sun a painful contrast to the cold darkness of the morning's confrontation. The house was now legally protected, destined to become a place of comfort for sick children, exactly the kind of legacy Arthur truly wanted, the final betrayal that forces the ultimate revenge turned into unexpected benevolence. I hadn't gained a penny, but I had gained peace, and I had honored Arthur's memory. The calm reflection settled in. The true reason Arthur wrote the codicil was not to punish Adam, but to force a greater good. He knew that Adam's greed would be his downfall, and he ensured that when the inevitable legal fight came, the house, the roots he had protected, would serve a purpose Adam never could. The next day, I received a simple letter from Adam's lawyer. Adam and Clara were filing for bankruptcy. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he only stated his intention to leave the state. The new betrayal or twist was that I felt not triumph, but deep, aching loss. I had saved the house, but I had lost my family. The story was over, the battle won. The silence in my house now feels different, it is no longer the quiet dread of waiting for the axe to fall, but the small relief or hope of a future secured, a legacy fulfilled. I look at Arthur's favorite armchair now. It's still there, no longer labeled dated junk. It is a reminder that the deepest wounds are not inflicted by enemies, but by the ones we love. The lesson I learned, standing in that quiet house with nothing but memories and a court judgment, is that not every victory brings joy, and sometimes, the kindest legacy is the one that prevents a loved one from destroying themselves entirely. Arthur didn't just save the house for the children, he saved me from the slow, degrading cruelty of watching my son choose avarice over family. He forced me to be strong, to defend the roots. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for what's right against overwhelming family betrayal, drop a comment. What's holding you back from finding your own peace?